Kellan had been walking for 3 days straight when he finally saw the shape of his home, if home still applied to something that looked like it had been chewed and spat back out by time. The war had ended 8 months ago, but the land didn't know it. Smoke still clung to some valleys like a bad habit. The road leading to his farm was a mess of ruts and broken stones, half swallowed by weeds that grew like they were racing to cover the evidence of what people had done to each other. His fence leaned like tired soldiers. The roof sagged in the middle. His windmill had lost a blade. But the chimney was breathing. A thin line of gray smoke curled into the cold autumn air, steady and deliberate, not the frantic smoke of a fire out of control. Someone had lit his hearth. Someone had slept under his rafters. Someone had decided his house was theirs, at least for a while. Kellan stopped at the edge of the yard. His hand drifted to the knife at his belt out of habit, not rage. War had taught him that most things weren't solved by steel. But steel made you feel like you had options, even when you didn't. The front door opened before he reached it. And Kellan's brain did that thing where it tries to reject reality like a bad taste. Because standing in his doorway was a woman who was not human. She was tall, taller than most men he'd fought beside, and striking in a way that made his breath catch even while his instincts screamed. Her skin was a deep, luminous blue, like midnight water under moonlight. Subtle obsidian-like scales traced her cheekbones and shoulders as if the world had decided to decorate her instead of merely make her. 2 curved horns framed her face like a crown, elegant rather than brutish. Long dark hair fell down her back in soft waves with a faint metallic sheen. Her eyes were amber with slit pupils, intense, yes, but not mindless. Magnetic. Assessing. The kind of gaze that measured a person and found the seams. She held a baby in one arm, small, wrapped in patched cloth. Behind her leg, a second child peeked out, older, watching with wary curiosity and a wooden sword clutched in 2 hands. Kellan stood on his own doorstep and forgot how to be a person for a full 2 seconds. His mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. The blue-horned woman spoke first. "You are Kellan Thorne," she said. Not a question, an observation delivered like weather. Kellan finally found his voice. It came out rough. "This is my house." "Yes," she said calmly. "That is why we are speaking." Her accent was thick, shaped by learning common through listening rather than schooling. The words were careful, but the meaning wasn't timid. Kellan's eyes flicked to the baby, then to the older child. "Who are you?" "I am Saelira," she said. "This is Bram." She tipped her chin toward the older child, who did not wave. "And this is Tovi." She glanced down at the baby, who chose that moment to gnaw on a strip of dried meat with total indifference to politics. "How long?" Kellan asked, because his mind was grasping for something measurable. "Since the first snows threatened," Saelira replied. 4 months. 4 months. Kellan did the quick math and felt his chest tighten. 4 months ago, there were still bodies on roads. 4 months ago, the countryside was still bleeding quietly. "You broke in," he said. Saelira nodded once. "Yes. The correct word is squatting." She didn't flinch from the ugliness of it. She didn't soften the edges to make it easier for him to swallow. Kellan stared past her into his own house. His table, his father's table, sat where it always had. But now a kettle steamed on the hearth. Clothes hung near the fire to dry, rough fabric, leather patched so many times it looked like it was made of repairs. A child's blanket. A small pile of peeled potatoes in a bowl. The house looked, lived in. And Kellan hated that his first reaction wasn't fury. It was confusion. "I should call the guards," he said, because it was what a man was supposed to say. "You could," Saelira agreed easily. "They will come. They will remove us. Bram will cry. Tovi will cry. I will not cry because," her jaw tightened, a flicker of something bitter, because I have learned that crying in front of humans is permission for them to feel righteous. She said it like a fact, not a threat. We would leave, she continued. We would die somewhere between here and wherever somewhere is. And you would have your house back. The baby made a happy gurgle, utterly unaware that her existence had just been weighed like a coin on a table. Kellan's throat went tight. The war is over. There are camps and aid for humans, Saelira cut in, voice still calm. Humans get resources. Humans get bread lines and blankets. People like me get stones. People like me get chased. People like me get told the war ended, but memory lasts longer than treaties. Kellan didn't argue because he'd seen it. Orcs, goblins, drake-blooded, anyone on the wrong side of someone's grief, treated like a walking crime. Saelira shifted the baby higher against her hip, protective without drama. I do not ask charity, she said. I have hunted. I have repaired what I could. I have kept your roof from collapsing entirely. I have kept your chimney from becoming a nest. You fixed the roof. Kellan blurted. Bram's head popped out a little more. A missing tusk gave her grin a lopsided look. I climbed, she announced proudly. Mama says I am small and brave. Saelira's mouth softened for a heartbeat, then returned to steady. I was a metalworker before the war, she said. I can work. I can pay. With what? Kellan asked before he could stop himself. Saelira looked at her children, then back at him. Her eyes held exhaustion that wasn't just tired. It was carrying too much alone for too long. With whatever you require, she said quietly. The words hung between them like smoke. Kellan felt something twist in his chest, anger and pity and something worse, the awareness that there were no clean solutions here, only less cruel ones. I need to think, he said finally, because his brain demanded time. Then think inside, Saelira replied, stepping back from the doorway. It is cold. Thinking works better when you are not freezing. And that was how Kellan ended up sitting at his own table in his own house, drinking tea that a blue-horn stranger had made from his stores, while her older child stared at him like she was trying to decide whether he was threat or furniture. The tea was good. Better than he remembered. You added something, Kellan said. Honey, Saelira replied. And mint. Humans drink tea like punishment. It should taste like reward. Kellan took another sip and hated that she was right. Then Bram pointed at his face and said, blunt as a hammer, you have sad eyes. Kellan's throat tightened. Saelira didn't scold her. She just watched him over the rim of her cup, calm, regal, and unafraid. Outside, the wind picked up and rattled the sagging fence. And Kellan realized he hadn't actually decided anything yet. But somehow, he was already letting them stay. Kellan told himself it was temporary. That was the only way his mind could accept the shape of the moment. A stranger in his chair, smoke in his chimney, children's footprints on his floorboards. Temporary meant it didn't have to rewrite him. Temporary meant he could endure discomfort the way he'd endured mud and hunger and marching, by counting days until the next thing replaced it. 1 week, he said, setting his cup down carefully, as if loud noises might break the fragile arrangement forming in the air. You can stay 1 week. Then you leave. Saelira didn't blink. She didn't bargain. She didn't offer a speech. She simply nodded once, the kind of nod that said she had lived on worse terms than this. 1 week is better than no weeks, she replied. We accept. Bram watched Kellan as if trying to memorize him. Tovi smacked her gums on the dried meat and then, with cruel timing, let out a delighted burble. Kellan stared at the baby. She's calm. Saelira's mouth curved faintly. Not quite a smile, more like a recognition. She does not know war, she said. She knows warmth. Food. And Bram's loud stories. Bram lifted her chin, offended. My stories are good. They are, Saelira agreed, steady as stone. It was unsettling, how she spoke to the child. Not with the hard discipline Kellan expected from someone who wore a blade and had those predator eyes. Not with softness that begged the world to be gentle. With something in between, structure. Certainty. A kind of love that didn't have to announce itself. Kellan pushed his chair back. He started. Bram immediately pointed at him. You snore. Kellan froze. What? You snore like wind in cave, Bram said, deadly serious, as if diagnosing illness. Mama says humans are noisy sleepers. But you are extra noisy. Saelira's gaze flicked to Bram. Bram. I am telling truth, Bram insisted. Truth is not rude. Only sharp. Kellan felt his ears heat. I don't snore. Bram squinted, as if assessing his honesty. Maybe you don't know you snore. Maybe you are asleep and your face forgets manners. Kellan inhaled. Exhaled. It was absurd. After 3 years of war, after watching men die, he was being insulted by an orc child in his own kitchen. Saelira's voice was quiet, controlled. Bram. Enough. Bram huffed, but retreated to the hearth where she began poking at a stick with her wooden sword like it was an enemy. Kellan looked at Saelira. Where are you from? A pause. Not fear, calculation. The Ash Hills, she said finally. South of the old border. Drake blood, Kellan murmured before he could stop himself. The blue skin. The horns. The scales. He'd heard stories on the front, half myth, half propaganda. People who could endure cold. People who had old magic in their bones. Saelira didn't bristle. She simply nodded. Yes. Why come here? Saelira's gaze drifted toward the window, toward Kellan's overgrown orchard. Because this place was empty, she said. And because it had a garden that someone had planted and then left. Kellan's throat tightened. My mother planted that. Saelira's eyes returned to him, softer for a heartbeat. Then she understood hunger, she said. Silence settled, not hostile, shared. Kellan had lived in silence that screamed. This one didn't. It simply existed. He stood. I'll show you the boundaries, he said. What's mine, what's not? Saelira rose smoothly, baby balanced on her hip without effort. We already know, she said. We have been careful. Kellan's jaw tightened. Still. They walked through the house. The living room, his father's tools now neatly arranged. The pantry, his stores reduced but rationed, not gutted. The back room, patched roof beams, mended carefully, better work than Kellan expected. You did this, Kellan said, touching a brace nailed in place. Saelira nodded. The wood was tired, she said simply. I made it remember its job. That phrase, made it remember. Stuck in Kellan's chest. He took them outside into the yard. The fence leaned, but repairs were obvious, new posts braced, wire tightened. The garden was larger than he remembered, rows cleaned, soil turned. Someone had been doing the work of living. Bran trotted after them, sword slung over her shoulder like a tiny soldier. She pointed toward the orchard. Trees are angry, she announced. Kellan blinked. What? Angry because nobody trimmed, Bram said, as if explaining obvious things. Branches fight each other. Mama says trees need humans or they become wild. Saelira's mouth tightened at humans, and then she corrected herself without looking at Kellan. Trees need tending, she said. Kellan swallowed. He'd meant to come home and rebuild. Instead, he'd come home and found someone else had started. He hated the relief it gave him. That night, Kellan took the upstairs childhood room as if it proved he still belonged. He lay awake listening. Below, Saelira hummed in a low language he didn't know, voice gentle as her hand patted the baby's back. Bram whispered to the dark, playing softly with her sword, making tiny battle sounds that were more imagination than violence. Kellan stared at the ceiling beam and thought, 1 week. Just 1 week. But already, his house didn't feel like a ruin anymore. It felt like a place where breath warmed the corners. And that terrified him more than any enemy line had. By the 3rd day, Kellan realized 2 things. 1, Saelira woke earlier than dawn, as if sleep was a luxury she didn't trust. 2, Bram was a force of nature wrapped in patched boots. He came downstairs one morning to find Saelira at his table, sharpening a small chisel with slow, precise strokes. She wasn't merely keeping busy. She was making the tool better, restoring its edge like it mattered. Tovi sat in a basket by the hearth, chewing on a cloth strip and staring at the ceiling as if studying architecture. Saelira poured Kellan tea without asking. That annoyed him. And warmed him. Both. "You're using my tools," he said, because it was safer than talking about the way her quiet competence made his home feel less dead. "I am repairing your roof," Saelira replied, calm. "A roof is a tool. Tools must be maintained." Kellan opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again because she wasn't wrong. The house creaked less now. The drafts had shifted. The chimney drew cleaner. It was like she'd been listening to the building's complaints and answering them. Bram appeared under his elbow. "Your face is doing thinking." Kellan choked on tea. "My face is doing what?" "Thinking," Bram repeated. "Humans put thoughts in eyebrows. Yours are loud." Saelira didn't look up from the chisel. "Bram." Bram sighed dramatically. "Fine. I will be quiet like a rock." She marched to the doorway and immediately said, loudly, "Rock quiet is boring." Kellan stared after her, then looked at Saelira. "Does she ever stop talking?" Saelira's lips twitched. "No." Kellan almost laughed. Almost. Later that afternoon, Kellan went to his old room upstairs to dig out a spare blanket. Under the bed, half forgotten, lay a small leather pouch. He'd carried it through the last year of war like a secret, touching it sometimes to remind himself he'd still have a reason to return. Seeds. Apple seeds from the last healthy tree on his mother's side of the family farm, burned in the first raids. He'd collected them from fallen fruit like they were relics. He'd kept them safe through mud and fire. He'd been too afraid to plant them. Because planting meant committing. Planting meant saying, "This is where my life continues. This is home now, even without her." He picked up the pouch and felt his throat tighten. And when he turned to go, Bram stood in the doorway holding an apple seed between 2 dirty fingers. Kellan's blood went cold. "Where did you get that?" Bram blinked innocently. "From bag." "What bag?" Bram lifted the pouch, his pouch, in her other hand and shook it once. Seeds rattled inside like tiny bones. Kellan's voice came out sharper than he intended. "You went through my things." "I was looking for interesting objects," Bram said matter of fact. "You have boring objects. But seeds are not boring. Seeds are potential." Kellan stepped closer, trying not to scare her while also trying not to explode. "Those are mine. They're special." Bram frowned as if struggling to understand the concept of someone owning potential. "Seeds are not pets," she declared. "You cannot keep them in bag forever. Must put in ground or they forget how to grow." The logic was childish and devastatingly correct. Kellan swallowed. "I was waiting for the right time." Bram's eyes narrowed. "Mama says now time is only time. Pastime is memory. Future time is worry. Now time is when planting happens. Kellan stared at her, stunned. He'd marched through war clinging to the idea of later. Later I'll rest. Later I'll plant. Later I'll live. Later had been a way to survive. But later was also how you never started. Bram thrust the pouch into his hands. Show me, she demanded, voice bright. Show me how to make trees. Kellan hesitated. Then, without understanding exactly when it happened, he found himself kneeling in the garden with Bram beside him and Saelira watching from the porch like a quiet sentinel. He showed Bram how deep to plant, how to space, how to mark the spots with stones. Bram listened with a seriousness that made Kellan's chest ache. The child treated the act like a ritual. Saelira came down eventually, baby on her hip, and placed a hand on Bram's head, gentle, grounding. You are planting human seeds, Bram told her proudly. Saelira's amber eyes flicked to Kellan. Seeds are seeds, she said softly. They grow for whoever tends them. Kellan pressed a seed into the soil and covered it carefully. For the first time since returning, he felt something in him loosen. Not healed. But, opened. Saelira's voice was quiet behind him. You carry grief like a stone, she said. Planting is, setting it down for a moment. Kellan's throat tightened. I don't want to forget my mother. Saelira shook her head once. Planting is not forgetting, she said. Planting is honoring. You make her memory into fruit. Bram patted the soil with both palms like sealing a promise. Tree will grow, she said firmly. Kellan looked at the small patch of disturbed earth and felt fear twist with hope. And somewhere in the house, Tovi let out a delighted squeal as if she approved of new beginnings. That night, Kellan lay awake again. But this time his thoughts weren't only loud. They were, moving. The village found out on the second week. It wasn't dramatic at first. It never was. Rumors moved like damp, quiet, creeping, impossible to fully stop once they started. Kellan went into the nearest village for nails and flour and came back with people staring too long and whispering too fast. On the 15th day, Ida came. Ida had been Kellan's nearest neighbor before the war, nearest meaning a 20-minute walk through woods and broken fence lines. She arrived at midday with a basket of bread and the kind of careful smile people wore when they wanted to pretend nothing had changed. Kellan. Ida gasped like she'd only just remembered he was alive. She hugged him hard. I heard you were back. We all thought, well, it doesn't matter what we thought. You're here. Kellan accepted the bread basket, trying to block the doorway with his body. Thank you, Ida. Ida's eyes flicked past him anyway, because curiosity is stronger than manners. And Bram chose that exact moment to pop out from behind Kellan's leg like a mischievous spirit. Ida's face did something complicated, shock, confusion, then horror so sharp it looked like pain. That's, Ida whispered. Bram blinked up at her. Hello, she said in common, proudly. I am Bram. I eat porridge. Ida made a small sound like her breath had been stolen. It talks, she whispered. Kellan's jaw tightened. She talks because she's a person. Ida took a step backward. Then another. The bread basket trembled in Kellan's hands. Kellan, Ida hissed, voice dropping. What have you done? I made an arrangement, Kellan said, too tired to soften it. An arrangement with, Ida's voice broke. With them? Bram tilted her head, studying Ida like a puzzle. You have big fear, she observed. Ida's eyes flashed. Don't let it speak to me. Saelira appeared behind Bram, stepping into view with quiet grace. She held Tovi on her hip, posture calm, eyes steady. Ida went pale. There's more. Kellan felt something in him harden. Saelira and her children have been living here, he said. They repaired the roof. They planted the garden. They've done more for this farm in 4 months than I managed in years. Ida's mouth opened and closed like she couldn't find words that didn't taste ugly. They're monsters, she finally whispered. Bram's brows knit. Monsters have 3 heads and eat villages, she said confidently. I have 1 head and eat bread. Ida flinched like Bram had slapped her. Kellan, she said, voice trembling with anger now, orcs killed our people. Kellan's jaw tightened. And humans killed theirs. Ida stared at him like he'd grown horns too. Your mother died because of their raids. Kellan's throat tightened. He could smell smoke in his memory. Hear screams. Feel the hollow absence of returning to an empty house after the conscription. My mother died because of war, he said quietly. Not because of Bram. Ida's eyes filled with furious tears. You always were too clever for your own good. Cleverness doesn't change facts. Facts are my house, Kellan snapped, sharper now. My land. My choice. Ida's face flushed. Then you're a fool. She thrust the bread basket at him like a weapon. A fool who's going to wake up with a knife in his throat. Saelira's gaze remained steady. If I wanted him dead, she said softly, he would be dead already. Ida went white and stumbled backward, clutching her shawl. Saints, she breathed, and fled. Bram watched her go, thoughtful. Fear makes people say not true things, she murmured. Kellan exhaled shakily. Sometimes. Bram looked up at him, suddenly serious. Did your people kill her people? Kellan stared at the child's golden eyes and felt war's awful arithmetic. Probably, he admitted. And hers probably killed mine. Bram's mouth tightened. Sad circle. Yes, Kellan whispered. That's war. That evening, Father Oswin came, thin, trembling hands, kind eyes, prayer book clutched like a shield. I've heard concerning reports, he said carefully. I'm sure you have, Kellan replied. Oswin glanced past Kellan to the window, where Saelira sat mending cloth by lamplight while Tovi slept in a basket. Bram's wooden sword lay by the hearth like a toy pretending to be a history lesson. Oswin's voice went quiet. The village is afraid, he admitted. They'll petition. They'll demand the occupants be removed. For what crime? Kellan asked, anger rising. Existing where they're not wanted. Oswin's mouth tightened. Mercy is supposed to be hard, he said slowly. Forgiveness is supposed to cost something. Scripture says to love your enemies, but it doesn't explain what that looks like when your enemy is sitting at your table. Kellan stared at him. And what do you think? Oswin hesitated. Then he met Kellan's eyes. I think you're either brave or foolish, he said softly. Possibly both. Kellan almost laughed. Everyone keeps saying that. Oswin's hands trembled as he finally opened his prayer book. I will pray, he said. Not because prayer fixes roofs, but because it's what I have. He left before Kellan could answer. That night, Kellan sat alone at his father's table, listening to Saelira's low lullaby upstairs. Bram padded down the stairs in an oversized human nightshirt, fabric swallowing her like a tent. Cannot sleep, Bram announced. Why? Kellan asked gently. Thinking too loud, Bram said, climbing into the chair across from him, feet swinging. If humans make us leave, where do we go? Kellan's throat tightened. He didn't have an answer that wasn't a lie. And upstairs, Saelira's lullaby continued, steady, gentle, like she was trying to sing the fear out of the walls. Kellan lasted 3 days after Ida's visit before he noticed the change. It wasn't one big thing. It was 1,000 small movements in people's faces when he walked through the village. Conversations stopped when he approached. Doors closed a little too quickly. A butcher who used to nod at him now looked away as if eye contact might become complicity. Fear spread faster than plague. It didn't need proof, only a story. Saelira didn't mention it. She kept working. Fixing fence posts. Tightening roof braces. Turning Kellan's abandoned farm into something that looked like it remembered how to stand. But Bram noticed everything. Village people smell sour now, she announced one morning while Kellan chopped wood. Like milk that wants to be cheese but fails. Kellan snorted despite himself. That's not how milk works. Bram shrugged. It is how feelings work. Kellan's laugh died when he saw Saelira watching from the porch, expression unreadable, exhaustion tucked behind dignity. That afternoon, Mjolnir arrived. Kellan knew Mjolnir from the war, not as a friend, not as an enemy either. Mjolnir had been an orc veteran who fought on the human side after switching factions when his clan betrayed him. He'd lost an arm, half his hearing, and any patience for lies. He limped into Kellan's yard with a cane and a grin that had too many missing teeth to be threatening. Mjolnir hears things, he said in third person, like he was narrating his own legend. Kellan's stomach tightened. What things? Mjolnir's eye, only one, the other clouded, flicked toward the house. Mjolnir hears human idiots are planning lesson. Lesson involves fire. Shouting. Possibly punching. Kellan's blood went cold. When? Soon, Mjolnir said. Tonight maybe. Beer makes men brave and stupid. Kellan swallowed. Why are you telling me? Mjolnir spat into the dirt. Because Mjolnir remembers orcs used to protect weak instead of punish different. His gaze sharpened. And because widow inside, she is not just squatter. Kellan frowned. What do you mean? Mjolnir limped closer. Saelira was smith, he said. Good hands. Good mind. Her mate died on field. Last words were not glory. Worked survive. Kellan's throat tightened. She told me he died quick. Mjolnir's face twisted. Widows lie to make grief smaller, he said. He took hours. Screamed. Fought. Lived long enough to send message. Mjolnir's gaze bored into Kellan. Message was, choose life over honor. Keep cubs alive. Kellan felt something heavy settle in his chest. Saelira had never said that. Would he, if he were her? If the person he loved most had used his last breath to tell her to defy her culture just to keep breathing? Mjolnir turned to leave, then paused like he couldn't help himself. Also, he added, human idiots might not only target orcs. Might target you. Call you traitor. Traitor word makes people do worse things. Kellan's mouth went dry. Thank you. Mjolnir snorted. Don't thank Mjolnir. Just, don't die. Dying is inconvenient. Kellan ran to the farmhouse like his legs remembered sprinting from arrows. He found Saelira outside splitting wood, axe rising and falling in clean, efficient strokes. She looked up at his approach and read his face instantly. What happened? She asked. Kellan told her everything. Mjolnir's warning. The village men. The word lesson. Saelira set the axe down gently, like she didn't want to alarm the air. Then she looked at the house, at the repaired roof, the straightened fence, the garden rows. At Bram's small stones marking apple seeds. We leave, she said simply. Kellan's stomach dropped. No. Saelira blinked. No. No, Kellan repeated, voice firmer. You're not leaving. Saelira's amber eyes narrowed. You are one man. Kellan swallowed. And you're one woman with 2 children. And yet you're still standing. Saelira's jaw tightened. Standing is not same as safe. Kellan took a breath and finally spoke the words he'd been circling for days. This is your home. Saelira stared at him like he'd spoken nonsense. We are temporary, she said quietly. Shelter until winter breaks. Then we go. Kellan shook his head. No. Home isn't a timetable. It's chosen. He gestured toward the house, toward the garden. You made this place alive again. Saelira's expression flickered, pain, surprise, something like fear of believing. Why? She asked softly. We are nothing to you. Kellan's throat tightened. I owe you everything, he said. You fixed what I didn't know how to fix. You planted my mother's seeds when I was too afraid to commit to living again. Bram appeared in the doorway, listening, eyes bright. Home is not just house, she announced. Home is where people choose to stay even when leaving is easier. Kellan stared at the child. Did your mother teach you that? Bram shrugged. Mama teaches many things. Some are about metal. Some are about living. Saelira looked down at Bram, then back at Kellan. Together is dangerous word, she said quietly. In my bloodline, together means oath. Kellan's jaw set. Then let it mean oath, he said. I'm done surviving alone. Saelira's breath caught. Just a fraction. Orc widows didn't cry where humans could see, but her eyes shone with something close. If they come, she said, voice low, what will you do? Kellan's hand drifted to his knife. I will stand, he said. I didn't survive war to come home and let bullies decide who gets to exist. Saelira studied him, then nodded once. Then I stand too, she said. And that night, boots crunched on gravel. Voices murmured drunk courage. 7 men appeared at Kellan's property line with firelight in their hands and hate in their throats. Kellan stepped forward to meet them. Saelira stepped beside him, calm, crowned by horns, baby asleep inside, older child watching from the window. And the lead man spat into the dirt and said the word that always turned fear into permission. Traitor. The men at the property line looked like the village had scraped the worst parts of itself into boots and given them torches. They weren't soldiers. They were the kind of men who'd spent the war watching other people fight and had come home with all the rage and none of the discipline. Their shoulders were big from farm work, their faces red from ale, and their eyes had that glassy shine that meant they'd already rehearsed violence in their minds enough times that it felt inevitable. The lead one was Markin, the blacksmith's son, broad, heavy, and angry in a way that made him seem taller than he was. He held a torch like it was a badge of office. Kellan, Markin called, trying to sound official, trying to pretend this was a civic duty and not a mob. We need to talk. Then talk, Kellan replied, voice flat. He didn't step forward. He didn't step back. He stood exactly on the edge of his land like a fence post that refused to lean. Saelira stood beside him, posture tall, calm, her hand near the blade at her waist without touching it. Her horns framed her face in the torchlight like a crown made of shadow. She didn't look like a monster. She looked like a woman who'd learned not to show fear because fear was a language predators understood too well. Markin's gaze flicked to her, his throat bobbed, and he forced his eyes back to Kellan as if looking at her too long would make his courage run away. We want to see them, Markin said, voice sharpening. The occupants. No, Kellan said. A man behind Markin. Stan, a farmer with grief in his eyes and beer on his breath, snarled. You hiding them like shame? I'm not hiding anyone, Kellan said. I'm refusing to parade children for your comfort. Children? Sten spat, like the word offended him. Orc spawn aren't. Saelira spoke then, quietly, and somehow her calm cut deeper than shouting. Say it, she said. Finish the sentence. Tell the world who you are. Sten's mouth worked. He didn't finish it. Markin lifted his torch higher, forcing confidence into his shoulders. This isn't about comfort. It's about safety. You shelter enemies, you invite trouble. You send a message. My house, Kellan replied. My message. Your message affects the village, Markin snapped. Kellan's jaw tightened. Then the village should have repaired my fence. The village should have helped me rebuild instead of whispering. You didn't show up with bread. You showed up with fire. A murmur rippled among the men. Uncomfortable, because nobody liked being described accurately. Markin tried again, voice harder. They killed our people. Kellan's chest tightened. He could feel Saelira's attention sharpen, like she was listening for the moment a sentence became an excuse for blood. I killed orcs, Kellan said suddenly. Silence hit like a thrown bucket of cold water. Markin blinked. What? I killed them, Kellan repeated, stepping forward a half pace so the torchlight caught his face. I counted some. 21. Maybe more. I stopped counting after the second winter because numbers stopped meaning anything when the dead started blending together. Sten shifted, uneasy. Someone swallowed loudly. Kellan's voice stayed steady, but his hands trembled slightly with the memory. I killed boys who couldn't grow beards. I killed men who cried for their mothers in a language I didn't speak. I killed a woman who tried to crawl toward her wounded child, and he stopped, jaw tight. I did it because I was told it was necessary. Markin's torch wavered slightly. And then I came home, Kellan continued, voice lower, and found a mother and 2 children in my house. The monsters. The justification. The enemy. He looked at Saelira. At her calm. At her tired eyes. And I didn't find monsters, he said. I found people who were hungry and cold and alive. Markin's face tightened. They're manipulating you. They're making me human, Kellan snapped. Something the war tried to scrape out of me. Saelira stepped forward 1 pace, voice quiet but carrying. You came to remove us by force, she said. To prove your hate is stronger than our will to live. She spread her hands slightly, not pleading, not theatrical. Just honest. Then do it. But understand something, mothers fight differently than soldiers. We fight with nothing to lose and everything to protect. The men shifted. A few looked away. Bram's voice came from the dark window behind Kellan, too loud, too fearless. Mama will bite you. Saelira didn't turn. She didn't smile. But Kellan saw the smallest twitch in her cheek like she was trying not to. Markin swallowed, then thrust his chin out. This isn't over, he said, but the certainty had leaked out of his tone. Kellan's voice was flat. Yes it is. Go home. Markin hesitated, then backed away like retreating from a line he wasn't prepared to cross after all. One by one, the men followed, boots crunching softer now, torches bobbing as they withdrew into the dark. When they were gone, Kellan exhaled like he'd been holding his lungs closed. Saelira's shoulders lowered a fraction. That was brave, she said quietly. Or stupid, Kellan muttered. Saelira's amber eyes held his. Both, she agreed. Then the wind shifted, and Kellan smelled smoke again, not from their chimney. From the direction of the village. And Bram's voice floated down the stairs behind them, suddenly small, Kellan. I think they are not done. They were not done. The village didn't come back with torches the next day. It came back with something more dangerous, official concern. Concern wrapped in scripture. Concern wrapped in, for the good of the community. Concern that gave cruelty a clean face so people could do ugly things and still sleep. Father Oswin returned at noon with 2 men Kellan didn't recognize, strangers in good cloaks, boots too clean for farm roads. One carried a satchel. One carried a rolled parchment. Kellan met them at the porch, Saelira beside him, Bram peering from behind the doorframe like a curious knife. Oswin's hands shook more than usual. Kellan, he said softly, they've sent a magistrate's clerk. The satchel man cleared his throat. By order of the county steward, he said, unrolling the parchment, all non-citizen war displaced persons are to report to a resettlement camp for processing. Kellan stared. Processing. The clerk kept reading like words were shields. Any property harboring unregistered non-citizens will be fined and, if necessary, seized to ensure compliance. Seized. Kellan's stomach went cold. So this is theft. It's law, the clerk said sharply, as if the difference mattered. Saelira's voice was calm. Your camp is for humans, she said. You do not have beds for my bloodline. You have cages. The clerk's eyes flicked to her horns and slid away quickly. You will comply, he said, voice brittle. Or we will return with guards. Bram leaned out and announced loudly, guards are just men who like rules more than thinking. Oswin flinched. Bram. She speaks truth, Saelira murmured. Kellan's jaw tightened. There's no camp for them, he said to Oswin, voice rising. You know that. Oswin's eyes looked pained. I know, he whispered. But the village is afraid. They think if they follow the paper, the fear will stop. Kellan took the parchment from the clerk and tore it in half. The clerk gasped like Kellan had torn scripture itself. You can't. I can, Kellan said flatly. This is my land. My house. If the steward wants it, he can come take it himself. The clerk's face reddened. You'll be arrested for obstruction. Then arrest me, Kellan said. Saelira's hand hovered near her blade, not threatening, just, ready. The clerk backed up as if the air around Saelira had teeth. You're making a mistake, he spat. Kellan stared him down. I've made worse, he said. The men left with Oswin, boots quick, shoulders tense. Oswin looked back once, eyes full of apology and helplessness. When they were gone, Saelira exhaled slowly. They will return, she said. Kellan nodded. With guards. Saelira's gaze drifted to the garden, to the stones marking seeds. Then we run, she said quietly. Not because we are wrong. Because children live longer when they move. Kellan's chest tightened. He hated that she said it like a practiced equation. No, he said softly. Saelira looked at him, incredulous. No. Kellan swallowed. We don't run, he said. We make them see. We make them admit what this is. Saelira's eyes narrowed. How? Kellan's mind raced. Witnesses. Proof. Shame. The village had a conscience buried under fear, you had to drag it into sunlight. We go to the steward's market day, he said. Public. Loud. We bring Oswin. We bring anyone who will speak. Saelira's mouth tightened. Humans will shout. Let them, Kellan said. Shouting is better than cages. Bram ran up to them, wooden sword in hand. Are we going to fight? She demanded, thrilled and terrified at once. Saelira crouched, eyes softening. No, she said gently. We are going to talk. Bram frowned. Talking is slow fighting. Kellan almost smiled. Exactly, he murmured. That night, Kellan lay awake again, listening to wind and distant village bells. And in the dark, Saelira's voice came quiet from the floor below, speaking to herself, not him. Together, she whispered, like a prayer and a warning. Kellan stared at the ceiling beam and realized the week was long past. He wasn't counting days anymore. He was counting what he'd lose if he stopped choosing them. And outside, far off, a dog barked, then another, like the countryside was waking up to trouble moving on the road. Market day smelled like wet wool, onions, and human certainty. Kellan hadn't been into the town square since before the war. Back then it had been loud in the normal way, vendors yelling prices, children running, old men arguing about crops. Now it was loud in a different way, sharper at the edges. Too many soldiers with no war. Too many widows with hollow eyes. Too many men who needed someone to blame so their grief could have a face. Kellan walked in with Saelira at his side, Bram holding his hand, and Tovi strapped to Saelira's chest in a sling. Saelira wore plain clothes, no armor. But her horns made her impossible to hide. She didn't try. Whispers hit them like thrown pebbles. Drake blood. Orc. Enemy. Witch. Look at her eyes. Bram squeezed Kellan's hand hard enough to hurt. They smell fear, she whispered. Kellan swallowed. Don't bite anyone, he murmured. Bram's grin flashed. No promises. Father Oswin waited near the well, pale and nervous. Beside him stood a woman with ink-stained fingers and a hard mouth, Clerk Marin, the steward's assistant. She held papers like they were weapons. Marin looked Saelira up and down without hiding disgust. So, she said loudly, this is the illegal occupant. Saelira's voice was calm. My name is Saelira. Marin waved a hand. Names don't matter. Status does. Kellan stepped forward. Her status is alive, he snapped. Which should be enough. Marin's eyes narrowed. Thorne, you are already on thin ground. Harboring non-citizens is a fine. Obstructing lawful orders is arrest. A crowd started to gather, always did when a public conflict smelled entertaining. Oswin cleared his throat. Marin, he said softly, these are a widow and children. The camps. The camps are for citizens, Marin cut in. Non-citizens are processed separately. Separately means cages, Saelira said quietly. Marin's mouth tightened. It means security. Bram spoke up, too loud, security is what bullies call their fists. A few people laughed nervously. Most glared. A man in the crowd shouted, they killed my brother. Another yelled, send them away. Kellan raised his voice. Where? He demanded. To the woods? To the road? To death? Marin lifted her papers. That is not our concern. Saelira's jaw tightened. It is always your concern, she said, voice low. You just pretend it is not so your hands stay clean. Marin's eyes flashed. Guards. 2 town guards pushed forward, helmets dented, spears held like they wanted something simple to stab. They stopped when they saw Saelira's height, her horns, her calm. One swallowed. Take her, Marin ordered. The guards hesitated. Kellan stepped between them and Saelira. No. One guard, younger, looked at Kellan with genuine misery. Kellan, don't make me. Make you what? Kellan snapped. Do what you'll regret. The crowd pressed closer, hungry. Saelira leaned toward Kellan, voice barely audible. If they take me, she whispered, do not follow. Keep children safe. Kellan's throat tightened. No. Bram suddenly let go of Kellan's hand and marched up to the well like she owned the square. Listen, she shouted. Everyone stared because children shouting is always unsettling. Bram puffed up, missing tusk making her fierce expression slightly ridiculous. My papa died in war, she declared. Humans killed him. A gasp rippled. Saelira went very still. Bram continued, fearless. Mama said do not hate because hate makes your heart ugly. Mama said survive. Mama said build. So we built in Kellan house because roof was tired and garden was lonely and winter was coming. People blinked, thrown off by the simplicity. Bram pointed at Marin. You want to put us in cage, she said. Cage is not peace. Cage is just war with walls. Silence held, fragile. Then Sten, grief farmer, shouted, "Shut that beast up." He pushed forward, hand raised. Kellan's blood turned to ice. Saelira moved faster than thought. She stepped between Sten and Bram, not drawing her blade, just standing tall, her eyes glowing amber, voice quiet. "Touch her," she said, "and I will forget mercy." The threat wasn't loud. That made it worse. The guards flinched. Merrin seized the moment. "See," she snapped to the crowd. "Dangerous. Violent. This is why we process them." The crowd surged again, fear reigniting. Kellan grabbed Bram back. "We're leaving," he hissed to Saelira. "Now." Saelira's jaw clenched. "Running makes us prey," she whispered. "Being alive makes us stubborn," Kellan whispered back. They pushed through the crowd, Oswin following, face pale. Behind them, Merrin shouted, "Seize the farm. Warrants will be served." Kellan's stomach dropped. "They'll take my land." Saelira's eyes narrowed, and her voice turned cold. "Then we stop thinking of this as an arrangement," she said softly. Kellan glanced at her. "What do we call it?" Saelira's gaze flicked to Bram clutching his sleeve and to Tovi's sleepy face against her chest. "We call it a fight," Saelira whispered. "The slow kind. The kind you win by staying." And as they left the square, Kellan saw something that made his blood chill: 3 riders on the road outside town, armed, wearing the steward's colors, heading toward his farm. Fast. Like they weren't coming to talk.